What if one of the most important companies in the history of farming was not the one everyone remembers? Not John Deere, not International Harvester, not Ford, but a company most people today have completely forgotten. A company that once built some of the biggest engines in America, powered factories, made turbines, changed farm machinery, and helped shape the way modern agriculture works. And then, somehow, it almost vanished from memory. The company was Allis-Chalmers. And the strangest part is this: for decades, it was not even trying to be a tractor company. It was an industrial giant that stumbled into agriculture, took one look at the farm business, and quietly became one of the most important names in the entire industry. Then it painted its machines bright orange, fought the biggest rivals in the country, helped modernize the American farm, and eventually disappeared piece by piece until almost nobody outside of collectors remembered it. This is the story of how a forgotten industrial giant helped build modern agriculture, and how the company that changed the farm became one of the biggest hidden stories in American business. If you saw an old Allis-Chalmers tractor sitting in a barn, you might think it was just another relic from a different time. But that orange machine is actually a clue to a company that was once one of the largest manufacturers in America, a company that built engines, turbines, electrical equipment, and farm machinery at a scale most people would never believe. In the early 1900s, Allis-Chalmers was already a giant in heavy industry, and by the middle of the century it was generating more revenue than IBM while employing tens of thousands of people. Yet today, its name barely registers with most people. That is what makes this story so strange. How does a company that big disappear? And how does a company that no one talks about end up helping shape the future of farming? To understand that, we have to go back to when Allis-Chalmers was not a tractor company at all. Part 1: Before the tractors. Allis-Chalmers began life as an industrial powerhouse. In 1901, the Edward P. Allis Company merged with several other firms to create Allis-Chalmers, bringing together expertise in mining machinery, ore crushing equipment, air compressors, and other heavy industrial systems. This was not a flashy consumer brand. This was the kind of company that built the hidden machinery of modern civilization. The slogan was basically a summary of its ambition: steam, gas, water, electricity, everything that made the industrial age work. By 1900, Allis-Chalmers was already considered one of the largest makers of steam engines in the world, and later expanded into turbines, generators, and almost every kind of engine and machine you could imagine. That matters because farming was about to change fast. America was moving away from horses and toward machines, and the companies that understood that shift early were the ones that would control the future. Allis-Chalmers did not start by trying to dominate farming. It entered the market by seeing an opportunity. The bigger names were already fighting over, and when it stepped in, it brought industrial scale with it. Part 2: The move that changed everything. In 1931, Allis-Chalmers bought the struggling Advance Roomley Thresher Company. That purchase was the turning point. Advance Roomley came with something very valued, a respected name among farmers, the oil pull tractor line, and a dealer network already in place. That instantly pushed Allis-Chalmers into the top tier of American farm equipment makers, making it the fourth largest maker of farm implements behind International Harvester, John Deere, and G. Case. That is when the company made a very important decision. It was not going to copy the old formula. It was going to stand out. So it chose orange, bright orange, the kind of color that makes a machine impossible to ignore. In a market dominated by dull industrial tones, Allis-Chalmers decided its tractors should look alive. That may sound like a small branding choice. It was not. It was a statement, a visual way of saying, this machine is different. And soon, the company started building tractors that matched the image. Part 3: The innovation that farmers felt immediately. One of the biggest reasons Allis-Chalmers mattered is that it did not just sell tractors. It made farming easier. The Allis-Chalmers Model U was one of the first tractors widely used with rubber tires instead of steel lugs. That made tractors more comfortable to operate and improved travel speed between fields. That sounds simple now, but in the farming world, comfort and efficiency are not small things. They are everything. A farmer who spends long hours on a machine notices the difference immediately. A machine that is easier to drive, quicker to move, and less punishing over a full day is a machine that saves time and labor. And time and labor are money. Then came the Model WC. This tractor became one of the company's defining machines. It was affordable, dependable, and practical, and its quick hitch system made attaching implements much easier than the older drawbar setups most companies still used. That is the kind of innovation that does not always sound dramatic in a headline, but on a farm, it is the difference between a machine that looks impressive and a machine that changes daily life. Later models like the WD and WD-45 kept refining that formula, improving power and operator comfort until they became icons of mid-century agriculture. Allis-Chalmers was building machines that were not just powerful, they were practical, and that is often what actually wins. Part 4: The giant most people missed. By the early 1950s, Allis-Chalmers was no small player. It employed more than 30,000 people and generated more annual revenue than IBM. It was also larger than 3 meters and Coca-Cola combined. That is not the profile of a niche tractor company. That is the profile of an American giant. And yet the average person today would be far more likely to recognize the names of its rivals. That is because Allis-Chalmers never became the single dominant brand in one category, the way some competitors did. It was enormous overall, but in key markets it was often third or fourth, and that became a weakness. Being big is not always enough. Sometimes the companies that try to do everything end up losing the parts that matter most. That is exactly what began to happen to Allis-Chalmers. Part 5: The problem with being too broad. The company was brilliant, but it was spread out. It was competing in farm machinery, power equipment, construction equipment, and more. That meant it was always fighting huge rivals, and not always with enough focus. By the 1970s and 1980 seconds, the crack started to show. Allis-Chalmers began selling off pieces of the business. Construction equipment went into one partnership. Farm equipment was spun into another. The power business was also broken away into a joint venture. Over time, these moves eventually led to the company's disappearance as an independent giant. This is where the story gets sad. Not because the company failed in one dramatic moment, but because it slowly came apart. The farm division was sold to Deutz in 1985, becoming Deutz Allis, which later evolved into AGCO. That meant the orange tractor legacy continued in another form, but the original company was fading out of existence. The brand that once helped modernize farming was now becoming history. Part 6: Why it still matters. And yet, the influence never really disappeared, because Allis-Chalmers helped normalize things that are now standard in agriculture. Rubber tires, easier implement hookups, better operator comfort, practical tractor design. The idea that a tractor should not just be strong, but efficient and usable for long hours. Those ideas helped reshape what modern farming looked like. That is why collectors still care. That is why old orange tractors still show up at shows and auctions. That is why the name still means something to the people who know. Because Allis-Chalmers was not just selling machines. It was helping define the modern farm. And the legacy is still out there, even if the company itself is gone. Engines built by Allis-Chalmers still power factories and plants around the world. And the old orange tractors are still prized today. So the real secret of Allis-Chalmers is not that it was a tractor company, it is that it was much bigger than that. It was an industrial giant that helped build the equipment, systems, and habits that modern agriculture would eventually depend on. It rose by being different, it survived by being innovative, and it disappeared because being brilliant is not always enough. When the market turns against you, that is what makes this story so powerful. Not just the rise, not just the fall, but the fact that one of the hidden architects of modern farming is a company almost nobody talks about today. And maybe that is the lesson. Sometimes the companies that build the future are not the ones we remember. Sometimes they are the ones painted orange. standing quietly in a field, waiting for someone to notice what they really were. A giant, a pioneer, and one of the secret companies that helped build modern agriculture.